Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm talking about the 2025 New York City mayoral race and giving my updating prediction for how I currently see this race going at obviously the beginning of September now, right around Labor Day, and how I think this race is going to end up all going and once media attention starts to pick this race up. Now, I just want to say at the start of the video, I couldn't find a specific map to use just of New York City. So for the purpose of today's video, I'm just going to be using the entire state of New York and coloring in the overall margin using the state of New York just instead of the city, just so there's no confusion on that. Okay, so with that said, let's get into the 2025 New York City mayoral race, because this is a very fascinating situation that is happening here. For starters, the New York City mayoral race is currently in between four candidates at this current point in time. Starting with the current mayor, Eric Adams, he won the election in 2021 as a Democrat after facing a lot of scandals and such over the last few years and few months now. Adams decided to not run in the Democratic primary and run for re-election as an independent candidate. So that alone shook up the race very much so. Another very important aspect of this race was what happened in the Democratic primary, which is Democratic governor or former Democratic governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who had to resign from office due to the scandals that faced him and plagued him. He ultimately decided to run for New York City mayor. And it was long assumed by many that Andrew Cuomo would end up being the Democratic nominee, until Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani decided to run for this race, running a grassroots campaign and really coming out of nowhere and all of a sudden being this big force in the Democratic primary. And even heading into the final days of the primary, there was a lot of Zohran Mamdani momentum, but ultimately most, including myself, predicted that Andrew Cuomo would still ultimately end up winning the Democratic primary, though we did expect it to be very close. But what ended up actually happening was on the first round of voting, as New York City, the Democratic primary utilizes a ranked choice voting system, Zohran Mamdani ended up defeating Andrew Cuomo in the first round, 43.82% to Cuomo's 36.12%, which was a very shocking result, as many, again including myself, expected at very least Andrew Cuomo to be leading on the first round of voting in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary, and if some way Mamdani was able to win, it would be because he barely squeaked by in the final round of voting, but that ultimately did not end up happening. It was the complete opposite. Mamdani was the one leading on round one, and then once the final rounds of ranked choice voting were tabulated, Mamdani ended up winning by a massive amount, 56.39% to Cuomo's 43.61%. So this was a very, very big Democratic primary. Now, Zohran Mamdani has gone very viral on social media and is someone that a lot of young Democratic voters and young progressive voters are really rallying behind, and is certainly scaring a lot of establishment New York Democrats, especially like those that supported Andrew Cuomo. So what Andrew Cuomo did was, under a different party name, he launched a third-party bid for New York City mayor after he lost the primary. So now you have Zohran Mamdani as the Democratic nominee, you have Eric Adams as the independent candidate, and you also have Andrew Cuomo launching a third-party candidate as well in the race, trying to stop Zohran Mamdani. Now we also have the Republican candidate, where this is a Republican nominee from 2021, Curtis Sliwa. He once again ran for the Republican nomination and ended up running unopposed and won this nomination without any trouble really at all. So the race is now set with Mamdani as the Democrat, Sliwa as the Republican, and now technically three independents in the race, with Eric Adams, the current mayor, Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, and also independent Jim Waldron. Now, no disrespect to Jim Waldron, but in the early polling data, he isn't taking up a huge amount of support, so he does really not factor into the overall conversation of this race as much as some of the other independent candidates in this race. There's also the Working Families parties as well, which often endorses the Democratic Party nominee in the general elections, even if they don't receive the WFP support in the respective Democratic primary. Now, once Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary, he became the nominee for this party. So it's going to be all of the Working Families party vote for Zohran Mamdani also gets added to the Democratic Mamdani's vote total. So that's a little bit of an interesting thing about New York City mayor. So that's up to speed really on what the candidates are and how they are doing. Now we're looking at the polling data, where there's not necessarily one specific polling average to look at, but the early polls have shown that in this race, Zohran Mamdani has been leading in pretty much every single poll, and has been really since he won the Democratic primary. The most recent poll from American Pulse Research and Polling shows the way the race is currently going. Mamdani starts out with 37%. Andrew Cuomo is in second place at 25%. Curtis Lee was in third at 17%. Eric Adams in fourth with 11%. Jim Waldron in fifth at 2%, with 8% of the vote undecided. So with that, roughly a 12% lead for Mamdani over the nearest challenger, which is Cuomo. Based on the way the race is currently going, the track record has been, if no candidates drop out, there's not enough undecided vote left to stop Zohran Mamdani from becoming the next mayor of New York City. And so far, it certainly seems that way. Now, there's been discussions out there about, well, what if Eric Adams or Curtis Lee were to drop out of the race and support Andrew Cuomo as one of the only candidates that can actually beat Zohran Mamdani, if that were to happen. That would give a better chance at stopping Mamdani, but Adams and Sliwa have been adamant that they will not be dropping out of the race for Andrew Cuomo, and they have gone after Cuomo just as much as they've gone after Zohran Mamdani, even though their polling data clearly shows Andrew Cuomo is the best candidate at stopping Zohran Mamdani in a head-to-head matchup. We even saw this in the recent Tolchin research poll, which showed Mamdani leading among all the candidates 42%, up to next to 26% for Cuomo. In the head-to-head of Cuomo versus Mamdani, Cuomo actually led 52% to 41%, with 7% still undecided, whereas Mamdani versus Cuomo ended up being 45 to 42. Pretty much in every instance, Mamdani in a head-to-head against any candidate not named Andrew Cuomo ultimately wins in these polls. Cuomo seems to be the only candidate in that head-to-head matchup that can maybe take Mamdani down. But for that to happen, Adams, Sliwa, and Waldron would all need to drop out of the race and support Cuomo, and thus far they've been adamant that will not be happening. So Mamdani has been polling roughly around the middle to even high 40% or so, 44%, 48% at times, 46%. He's in very good standing to become the next mayor of New York City. The question will be, if all the candidates remain in the race, what does his margin of victory end up looking like? And that's where things are very complicated, because based on what the 2021 mayoral election looked like in New York City, we really don't have much to go off of, because that was Democrat Eric Adams facing off against Republican Curtis Sliwa. So it was a head-to-head election that ended up being a very big blowout win for the Democrat. Every borough in New York City, except for Richmond County, where Staten Island is, they all went Democratic. Staten Island's the only one that went Republican. This time around, we're looking at a race where there's going to be multiple candidates running and a lot of Democratic vote, probably vote splitting between Mamdani and Cuomo and Adams and Waldron even a little bit as well. So it's very interesting to watch for as well. Gotham polling and analytics from back on August 11th had the race with Mamdani at 42 and Cuomo at 23. And that head-to-head matchup, Mamdani led over Cuomo 42 to 31, with 27% undecided. So it still seems there is a good number of undecided vote left out there in this New York City mayoral race. But right now, it certainly looks like Zohran Mamdani has a large enough lead to become the next mayor of New York City, and the third-party candidates really splitting the vote is only making that outcome even more likely. Ultimately, come Election Day, how this all ends up going, it really is contingent on what the other candidates decide to do. The truth is, the only way Mamdani does not become mayor is if they all drop out and endorse Cuomo. And I personally think there's less than like a 10% chance of that happening, since Adams and Sliwa have been adamant they are not getting out of this race. So when it comes to predicting the New York City mayoral election, right now I am definitely forecasting Zohran Mamdani to win this race. The question will be what the margin is. And of the scale of safe being 15% or more as a safe victory, likely rating being in between 5 and 15%, and 5 and under, or 5 to 1 being lean and 1 under being tilt. Right now I'm currently forecasting for Zohran Mamdani to win in the likely category of a 5 to 15% margin victory. Based on the way the race is currently going, I have Mamdani winning by around that 13 to 14% margin at this current point in time. There isn't a lot of undecided vote left out there in the four-way contest, but I do think Mamdani gets at least 2 or 3% of those undecided voters and ultimately ends up giving him the victory. Now, if all the candidates but Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo drop out of the race, then I think it becomes a much more interesting conversation, and I would do a video down the road discussing that possibility. But Mamdani versus Cuomo, that you could see Cuomo actually maybe win that matchup. I would still very narrowly have it starting out in the lean category for Mamdani at this current point in time, but I do think it would be a much closer race in that scenario. But the way the race is currently constructed, I do have Zohran Mamdani defeating Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa and Eric Adams in this race by around 13% at this current point in time. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below telling me your thoughts and any comments or questions you have about this race. If you live in New York City, which candidate are you supporting in this race? Make sure to leave that all down below. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in a future video.